And of course, coming from a country who has just seen, I don't want to say creative destruction per se, but change, transition, I think it really opens up to a world of new possibilities, especially as we look at the external threats, domestically as well. I thought, since both speakers took a very macro look at the beginning, I want to focus more on the Malaysian experience. All of you here are experts in your own right. You from 20 countries per se. It took forever before Malaysia was chosen as a host. So I'm sure you wouldn't mind if I spend some time to at least illustrate the key ingredient that's required for a particular nation to be built, which also was mentioned by Prof. Anil just now in terms of human capital. Yeah. So ladies and gentlemen, I think Malaysia is a home to long-term planning. Most of you, at least my generation, just before the millennials, we were accustomed to the term Vision 2020. So even though we had quite a strong, I wouldn't say fight, but war, perhaps disagreement with Tun Mahathir Mohamad, the vision of 2020 was the one that captured my generation in terms of targets, in terms of knowing where Malaysia must and should be headed. And of course, this is also illustrated from our various Malaysia plans. From the 9th Malaysia Plan to now the 11th Malaysia Plan, you could see the involvement of the government trying to change. We had about 22 to 78% of physical projects versus non-physical projects. And this improved to 40-60, meaning 60% was allocated to non-physical projects. A keen understanding that for a country to prosper is not about how many great buildings you build, even though it's important, but whether those buildings end up servicing, end up bringing a level of quality of life affecting its citizens. And that's the hallmark of a living city or living nation, as some might term it. So because of this, I think, of course, looking at Malaysia, I was very excited to hear what Chris said. New buildings, our Kuala Lumpur International Airport is far newer than Heathrow. We need to increase the number of occupants and passengers, of course, but the point is, for a middle-income nation such as ours, there's much that we can achieve. Indeed, I believe it's important for us to understand some of the challenges, and I think in order to improve, you have to be humble enough to understand the key weaknesses or the key challenges that you have to first and foremost overcome. I think the mistake in many of the ASEAN values, ASEAN context, is to always trumpet our success, always having to protect ourselves from revealing too much. Well, I think in a tempered view of understanding this is where we have to go, this is the human capital achievements that we have to improve on, will help us moving ahead. So the middle income trap is the key thing that has always been highlighted. I think from the change that has taken place, I'm excited to understand and to see that the opposition, the new opposition, have also highlighted the need for Malaysia, to address its weaknesses. And that's what you need in a democracy. You need all stakeholders to work properly, to work accordingly. For us, we were benchmarked with countries like Taiwan and South Korea. Prof. Wu knows this. In the late 80s, was South Korea and Taiwan is certainly not so far from where we are. But for us, I think right now we have lagged behind considerably, and Taiwan is now well known for a high technology industry over the past 2 decades, and has been identified as the 4th largest information hardware and semiconductor industries in the world. So certainly it's important to sort of benchmark ourselves. We have 20 countries, participants from all over the world, and I do hope that this story, in terms of showing Malaysia what we need to do to improve and drive forward our human capital, will help other countries to not just take opportunities presented here, because mind you, there's a world of possibilities that are presented to us, but also for us to learn from other countries. Now, it was mentioned earlier, I'm the chair now of the Technical and Vocational Educational Training, TVET. In the UK, it's termed as the professionally skilled persons. When you can rebrand it, whatever you want, but 45% of Malaysians depend on TVET. And what's more compelling, because in any assessment of the human capital, I think it's quite crucial to dive in, to be more detailed. And one of the key things I did, which was also taken part of what the previous government did, was to depend on experts to provide some understanding and depth. Today we have Deloitte, but for TVET, there were 3 reports provided for. The World Bank, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and Boston Consulting Group, all on what's needed for TVET in this country. And one of the key things that's important to note is, when you look at the human capital dimension, majority of these young Malaysians involved in TVET are male. A cursory glance would make you feel, okay, that's a good thing, but the problem is the female students, female graduates in tertiary institutions far outweigh the number of male graduates, meaning young boys at the age of 15 opt out of pursuing tertiary education for many factors, for many reasons. So eventually, once they join the TVET world, they will be competing with the likes of a lot of foreign workers, and eventually a social rupture can take place because they are less qualified than their female counterparts. Penang Institute did a study and called this as the lost boys phenomenon. Numerically, the difference between female and male enrollment in the public universities, they've increased from 67,000 in 2009 to 86,000 by 2013. So you have almost 90,000 more females in all the institutions, educational universities in Malaysia compared to their male counterparts. So certainly it gives us this opportunity. Doesn't mean if you are educated in TVET that you're not able to gain a higher degree of wage or much more skillful, but it would mean that connection to industry, the ability for different the construction sector, for example, to absorb these graduates is far more important than the graduate level. And I think, of course, we have one of the key unique in Malaysian experiences, we have 7 ministries in charge of TVET. Now, having 7 ministries means you need to ensure a single authority is able to control the different institutions, more than 1,200 government institutions in this country. So I wanted to suggest, and I'm working towards making sure, if you have only one, today, the Federation of ASEAN and Western Pacific Contractors, so must there be only one TVET authority that governs all the 7 ministries and their work moving forward. So one of the key issues that we are suggesting is to make sure there is a committee, a commission in Parliament to oversee TVET and industries. I've heard some of the companies here have developed their own certification. They've made sure the graduates are able to be embraced and absorbed automatically upon graduating, and this is the way to go. So Dr. M mentioned earlier that the flexibility and the ability of any country to understand that the government does not know best. It's impossible for the government to be able to control, to provide for, to solve everything. Most of the solutions today, the best solutions, are always going to be brought by a third party. So what the government, or what governments should be doing, is to provide a conducive environment where not just businesses can thrive, but also be a clear-cut, play an ombudsman role. Their credibility must be intact. They should not be crowding out businesses, but by the same token, they should be mindful of businesses that do not provide for much benefit for the country. So ladies and gentlemen, A key driver of economic growth that Schumpeter also mentioned is innovation. And I think it would be unfair for all of us if we don't take a closer look, and give a frank appraisal. What are the key weaknesses that's afflicting each of our countries? How can we improve so that innovation is going to be an automatic go-to effort or initiative by any particular stakeholder that engages with us? Now, I want to touch on the intellectual property and the whole mechanism and infrastructure governing it in Malaysia. The Intellectual Property Corporation of Malaysia, IPO, they've stated of all the patents issued since 1986 up to 2016, only 6.16% were granted to Malaysians. So Malaysians domestically have to do a lot more, not just to be seen as innovative, but be supported for their efforts at trying to be creative and innovative. Only 22% of patents applied for by Malaysians are granted, whereas 93% of foreign applicants receive patent grants, and 7% were grants for Malaysian applicants. So of course, domestically we have this challenge, but I think talking big about having this focus on innovation, having these grand plans, it would not bear fruit unless you zero in the actual implementation and understand if you don't give out patents effectively, if you don't have clear-cut KPIs in every area, as the supply chain highlighted by Chris just now, how would you be able to fulfill your potential? So I think these are the key elements, whereas for us, there are in various reports, various findings, but in many countries, one of the key things that pushes their degree of success is the degree of successful implementation. So for me today, when we talk about the scene post-elections, there are many consternations. There's much consternation, there's much concern, specifically when Malaysia has been home to Keynesian economics. Government has been seen to drive economic growth. A lot of construction work and mega projects have been the usual staple approval and diet in Parliament, in Cabinet. But now, it's really important to also understand, do we continue more of the same, or do we allow for certain flexibilities in this room without hampering the market or without causing too much disruption that the local or usual players suffer in the process? So that for me is the key question, and I do believe if we manage to address the key weaknesses and move to make a simplified and clear-cut manner moving forward, especially in developing our human capital, then the lost boys will not necessarily be lost, but will be healed, will be able to be absorbed by the different industries and earn much more than the ones who just carry a university degree without having an adequate understanding and in-depth knowledge of what the industry wants. So again, Malaysia is more than ready, and we welcome your input and your feedback, and we believe that the more frank you are, the more effective we can be.